Welcome everybody to another episode of the Power of Story podcast. This is Dashaun, Vice President of Self-Publish in 30 Days. I'm joined today by a very special guest. I consider this woman to be a sister, an ally on this journey that we both have of helping former athletes. I'm going to give her a very brief introduction, but I do not want to take away from Marley talking about her own story and introducing herself. But just to give listeners a little bit of background, Ms. Holmes is a former Division I volleyball player who is now a social worker and entrepreneur. She has mastered the art of utilizing her athletic training to adapt and contribute to social work and athletics successfully. And by creatively combining her passion for sports and social work, she founded the Black Female Collegiate Athlete Experience. The BFCA experience focuses on athlete success beneath the jersey by providing tools that prepare, support, and motivate players, parents, and coaches beyond the game. Ms. Marley Holmes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this interview. I know we are going to get into it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to have you. You have an amazing story, which is why I wanted to have you on the Power of Story and Thrive After Sports to inspire all those current and former athletes out there who are looking into carving out a lane for themselves and doing big things in the world. And you have definitely done that. You were a two-sport athlete in college, correct?
Correct. I started out at a JUCO where I was kind of a walk-on for tennis. A coach saw me playing and was like, I think we need you on the team. So it was unexpected. So I played in tennis and volleyball in JUCO, but volleyball is my primary sport. And then I was recruited to Bethune-Cookman, where I just continued to only play volleyball my last 2 years.
Got it. Okay. And then while you were at Bethune-Cookman, did you have any kind of, entrepreneurial tendencies, or like what was your experience there while you were still in school?
I think that's what's interesting about my journey. There was really, I would say, no mindset, no preparation for the entrepreneur journey. And the reason being, as an athlete and as, my aunt played tennis in college, but she wasn't a athlete like focused mindset, right? Like I knew that I was going to school, I was going to push for a scholarship. I got that. And we were going to make this happen. So I kind of just did the normal 1, 2, 3, 4, go to school, keep your grades up. Wasn't really prepared for the transition after. So I was just like, okay, I got to graduate this degree. My academic advisor is saying, I think you would be a good social worker. So there really was not ever a long-term plan for what's next. And then I went to UCF and got my master's in social work. And it's funny that we're talking about this because I'm really focused right now on redefining the experience. And we're hearing the word a lot of reimagining, right? The experience of certain departments. So with social work, you're very boxed in. For me, at least, I'll say from my experience, most social workers, you know that you're going to go into private practice, or you're going to be a medical social worker, or you're going to work, in foster care or somewhere in that avenue. So to be a sports social worker was so far from anything that I could have imagined. Who knew it was even an option? And, I worked in healthcare as a social worker in administration, regional directors, and a lot of other careers well before I got to this journey, because I never knew it was possible. There was something always, I was always earning for something, like just what is it? What am I missing? I volunteered. I did a lot of stuff that still had me connected to sports. But as far as a career in the entrepreneurship, that was way down the line.
So at which point, and it's interesting because you and I may have discussed this on your podcast. That's the Yup, She Said It podcast, by the way, y'all. Please, please. I was planning it. I know we're going to talk about that at the end, but please go check out her podcast. You never know what you're going to get from Marley. You're doing great interviews. You have great solo segments. You're doing meditations, guided meditations on there.
Thank you.
Yes, y'all, please go check out the Yup, She Said It podcast. One of the things that you and I discussed when I was on your podcast, I believe, is how I was never a social worker, but I did work alongside social workers. And I know what you mean about feeling boxed in, where social work, it's called social work for a reason, because you're having an impact socially on other human beings. And that's a great, rewarding feeling. My question for you is, while you were, you went on to get your master's and, as a social worker, while you were in that career, what is it that had you kind of say, okay, I'm helping and I'm serving other people, but I have a broader vision and I know I can make a bigger impact? Was there a moment for you, or was it kind of a gradual process?
Well, that's a great question. What happened for me was I was in healthcare for about 10 years. And so what I did was I worked with mental health. I worked with substance abuse and medical. So I was going back and forth between South Florida and Orlando. So after about 10 years, if anyone's ever heard of the term burnout, that's where I was in my career, where I was on call 24/7. It was nonstop. Then I started having some health complications, and I just knew that this wasn't it. And I wasn't your conventional administrator, right? So I was finding ways to create programs. I was finding ways to talk about sports and finding people's hobbies and interests and being creative in the conversations. That was my social work hat. I'm finding some of those strengths that people had, or if they were younger, if they were in high school, because my clients and our patients, as you can imagine, you know, as young as you can possibly think, as far as walking and talking, all the way up to, you know, 90 plus. So I was always able to find connections with people. And so I left healthcare literally on faith and said, this is not working. I'd like to work with people. I need to get back to the younger population. This is where I'm making an impact, because I saw that in the hospital, those were the ones that I was connecting to, right? Because you're a little closer to them in age. They can kind of connect with you. I would go out, you know, in the recreational area. I would encourage our sites to have recreational activities. So one of my hospitals actually had a gym, and I would work with our school that was on site. So I was finding a creative way to weave in the sports, but still not thinking, I'm going to have my own business. I'm going to do this down the line. So the light bulb went off when I got into, so I became an adjunct professor for Bethune-Cookman. So that was an opportunity. And then I became a regional director for an education program, a tutoring program. And I would travel between Florida and Texas. And in that opportunity is where I started to discover the leverage that I had as an athlete. You know, I experienced sexism, I experienced racism, I experienced ageism in this organization because the population was very affluent. So here I am as a Black female where people are paying $10, $15, $20, $30,000 for tutoring, okay, for college readiness, for SAT, ACT prep. And I was struggling a little bit with getting one of our sites open and getting the revenue in. And so I was like, how do I set up my office? How do I welcome people in? So believe it or not, I think it's just prayer and God. I started to put my jersey up, my player cards from Bethune-Cookman, and that started to cause conversation. And so they're like, oh, so you were an athlete? I say, yeah, I played Bethune-Cookman. Well, what division is that? You know, oh, it's Division I. Oh, you played Division I. Oh, you were really good. And that's how the conversation started. That's how I got into a lot of schools to speak directly. I mean, people didn't even want to do background screenings. They heard Division I athlete, and I was going to areas that would not even return emails. So that's when the light bulb went off for me. And then where I knew that there was an opportunity that I needed to step out and create my own was when I started to see the challenges as far as the limited resources and how this company I work for intentionally did not market to minority communities intentionally. So for me, I'm not gonna, you know, agree with that. So I'm gonna go into these places and go to these back to school programs. And I found that coaches, parents would do anything, literally they could. They had parents taking out loans, and it would make me feel so bad. But that's how bad they wanted education. That's how bad these kids wanted to play sports in college, you know? And they're saying, if she did it and she believes in me, I'm gonna make this happen. But what I found was that there was emotional challenges, psychiatric, as far as and mental health concerns that these parents weren't addressing, and they were inflicting their experiences with athletics or their fears onto their children. And that was impacting their grades and their abilities. So I was able to merge social work and athletics all in one by just strictly using my journey, not necessarily digging into research, just literally using my journey with recruitment, you know, having the SAT, what we used to call clearinghouse, and then I think it's still clearinghouse, and that whole journey with them, I was like, wow, there's something here. So in that process, I was already pursuing my doctorate at Barry University. I almost forgot my school name. Here at Barry University, it's so weird because we're not on campus anymore. Everything's virtual. So in that point is when I started to really say, let me look more into this experience and what this looks like. And there's very limited research. And that's where the light bulb went off based on what I was seeing and what I know and what I had seen firsthand is really where I started to shape and develop the BFCA experience.
Wow. See, I already knew about your journey. I didn't know that much. So I'm sitting here getting inspired by you all over again, because I knew some, but you just took a deep dive. There's a lot to unpack there that I want to make sure that the listeners don't miss. So I think there's a lot of conversation, and you probably encountered some of this too, about how athletes feel like, and I felt this way too, you know, a former athlete feels like it doesn't matter that they played sports because it doesn't transfer because they don't have experience. So that can be a hang up for a lot of athletes, whereas you were able to find a window, right? I think that's key. You know, I would do that too sometimes. I would go in interviews and leverage my experience to be able to get the job. I'm a go-getter, I'm a competitor. You found a window not only to create access to yourself while you were in that educational role, to create opportunities. So not only for yourself, but you use that to leverage and create opportunities for others. And see, this is why I wanted to have you on, right? The power of story. I didn't even know that was coming. So you just blowing me out the water right now. That's huge. That's amazing. And the fact that you were able to do that, I think speaks volumes. And I hope any athletes tuning into this will understand that don't take your experience for granted, or don't feel like, oh, I don't have any experience doing anything else. Like, there's always people who are going to be interested in you just off the fact that you play sports. As you hear from Marley's story, like, she created an opportunity for herself and for others because of that. And I think that's huge.
Thank you.
And then, so talk to me about, once you saw the window, once you saw the light, you start opening doors for people, and you say you were pursuing your doctorate at the same time that you were in this role, right?
All literally happened all together. So I started school shortly after. I kind of left the end of the education program and I was starting school. So I was fully invested in school, and I'm all over the place. When you hear social work, literally, I am the epitome of a social worker, meaning that we can do anything. So from there, I was like, okay, it served its purpose here. God sent me in another direction where I ran an education program, strictly education, for a substance abuse program. So that's where I learned with curriculum development, right? And how to track and monitor scores, how to make sure that my students who were patients, as far as their literacy, their education, their goals, their resources, and again, tapping into their journey. A lot of them played athletics, right? And in the area it was also an affluent community. So a lot of them were former professional athletes or semi-pro. So I was always able to find an avenue for them. But while in that, I said, this is where you start taking those skills and those building blocks along your journey, and you start to tap in, what is it that you need? And so through the research that I was finding the breakdown with the transition out of sports, when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, I was learning about intersectionality a lot more than I ever knew. And so I was like, wow, this is me. That's really where the aha moment, as Oprah used to say, was I'm reading about myself. Like, I'm literally reading about the transition after, the emotions you go through, the confusion, ability to push forward and never really process what happened. So my transition out of sports was, in my opinion, a disaster, because a coach that helped me transition, my head coach, who helped me transition from my JUCO, which was Independence College. So if you've watched Netflix, Last Chance U, that football coach that was a little off the chain, that's where I went to school. And so she helped me, get to HBCU. And she didn't know she never heard of an HBCU. She didn't know anything about this, but she was a white woman. And she was my biggest supporter to helping me get to an HBCU. So I never forgot that experience, right? And then when I got to college, unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away literally the night before my senior match. Okay. So I didn't have a chance to grieve. It's your last game of your career. We made it to first round of MEAC. So I literally flew with my team, went to her funeral, came back to MEAC to play. My coach didn't put me in. So I didn't play in the last match of my career. So that was an awakening for me, that no matter how much you show up for a sport, how much you show up for a game, what are you doing for yourself? And so that was my awakening. And so, early on, but it took for me to do research and realize that I wasn't prepared for the transition. I wasn't prepared for the interviews and the jobs. I'd never done an internship in undergrad, right? It was a huge moment. And I realized relationships, and friendships, and how I was literally giving 200% of myself into these careers and never taking time for me. That was still my athletic mindset. Because with sports, you know that you can practice in preseason, you can lift weights, you can shoot more free throws, and you're going to see the results, right? But what I was in a vicious cycle that no matter how much I showed up for these jobs, everything was just going to repeat. It wasn't necessarily going to improve. It was just going to repeat. So what did I want to do for myself? And so that's where I realized that the breakdown is for athletes, where we see the high rates of depression, anxiety, and they can vary on sports. And then we all have heard the stories with suicide, you know, those that died by suicide after sports, because they are not prepared. And I'm just focused on making sure that athletes have everything they need during their playing time, and they're prepared in the midst of that transition, and we have someone that's available. So that was the primary reason that I saw myself in this literature. And I was like, I never knew this was a thing. I called teammates and it's like, did you know that we went through an identity journey? Did you know we had to develop who we were? Did you know this started when we first started playing sports? And literally it was everyone, and nobody knew this. So I'm like, if we don't know, a lot of people don't know.
That's huge. And I feel like based on a lot of the work you're doing, I look at you as one of the pioneers in this space, one of the people who has kind of brought this conversation to light. You know, wow. I'm someone who works with I work with former athletes once they're graduated, already trying to figure out their next steps. But people like yourself who are doing the work, and not just, you know, kind of like coaching, but also going in there and doing workshops, you know, putting out material. It's the educating part that really gets me, that I really appreciate about what you do, because like you said, you didn't know until you were educated. So if you can present other people with this information ahead of time, that means, you know, by the time they get to me to start doing some work, they might be in a little bit better place. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. They know that they have a better idea of the questions they need to ask. They don't necessarily show up as a blank canvas, right? Hopefully when people work with me, that they have a better sense of self-advocacy. That's a big part of social work. Like I do everything through what we call a strengths-based model, or a solution-focused model, that I want to focus on your strengths. What are your plans? How are you going to get there? And now it's a team effort. You have to show up for yourself, and I can meet you halfway, because you may not believe in everything. You may not know that all that is there. And as an athlete, we don't necessarily know all the talents and skills we have. And I know that's a lot what you talk about with the transition and understanding some of those talents and skills you developed over here that we all say are transferable. And so having to teach people that. And I will say with the pioneer, I love it, but I'm still early, but there are some women in this field that have led the way for me, that have taken me under their wing, you know, like Dr. Akilah Carter-Francine, who is amazing and has dedicated her career to Black women, Black female athletes, and bringing awareness with the Black Women in Sports Foundation. Dr. Gill, I believe, who was the founder, has been doing this work for over 30 years. The issue is what we're all finding is, how do we get that to the masses, you know? Black women in sports and women in sports, we didn't enter the college space until 1972 for women in college sports. So that's fairly recent. And then you add race on top of that. What was that experience and what does that look like? So there are women that have led the way, and I've met an amazing community of Black women specifically who are in this space that are saying, let's talk about all women, but we have to address this because there is a difference between our experience and our successes after. So the community of women that are working on this, I do think we are in a serious shift that is going to take us in a place that we've never seen before. And I think it's all that's going on that is saying, hey, this work that people have been doing for years, now people are looking for it. Now they are reading it and they are understanding it. That's the difference.
And I think it takes someone like yourself, someone just like when you were in the educational role, where the players feel like, or the people involved that you're helping feel like they can relate to you. Yeah. So I think that's what you're experiencing right now. They feel like, I see myself in Marley, you know, and they're able to kind of gravitate towards you because of that and be receptive to the information that you're presenting. I have a page full of notes over here as far as things that I wanted to get to you with. I'm not even talking about before we got on the call, but a page full of notes based off things you're saying.
Oh, wow.
So I want to touch on something really quick, and then we'll come back to it. And that was what you said about the women who have taken you under their wing. right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's so important. I talk a lot about that. I think that that's huge for, I call it drafting mentors, like seeking out people who you can pull into your life, who can help lift you up. So I have kind of a two-part question. At the time where you were starting the BFCA experience, right? Were you actively seeking out these women, or did these women kind of come along as you were already doing your thing and getting things rolling?
That's really good. So the way that I kind of found my community, it's again, God sent. So whoever you believe in, if you believe in God, pray who you pray to, because it works. Let me tell you.
That's right.
So while I was in school, I was crazy and I changed my topic halfway through. And so I told one of my favorite professors, I said, there's something here with Black women and athletics and transition and mental health, and I want to do research on it. And she said, I have no clue how to do that, but if you have an interest in it, we can make it happen. So literally a week later, she overheard a conversation of a young lady who was preparing for a TED Talk on the ACEs study, and her topic was called Benched. So she was talking about athletes and some of the challenges according to the ACEs study that she experienced and what she wanted to talk about. And so my professor, she's amazing, she interrupted that conversation and said, hey, I have a student and I think she really needs to meet you. So I connected with that young lady, and she was a member of the organization Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. And so that's where everything started for me. I joined that organization. I'm still a part of it now. It's amazing. And that's where the community came from, doing my kind of initial conversation with the president at the time, Matt Moore. Well, he's the vice president. He's the president now of the organization. And I explained to him what I was interested in, what I'm doing. And he was like, yeah, yeah, come on in. And so from that, they're always letting us know events, workshops, things that are happening. So I would say the first person I met in this field was Dr. Janice Hilliard. And she's amazing. And so she had a workshop in Orlando that was going to talk about women in sports development, right? Athlete development. And she brought in people that work in the professional sector, people that work in college, people that recently graduated. And so that's where it started. So you have to be able to find and put yourself in a space. So for me, it was finding an organization to be a part of, and that's where doors open. So that's where I found out about opportunities. She would recommend me to connect with certain people. I would, talk to people when I would go to conferences. So that's where it began. And then every conference that I could present at, I would submit to, and then I was just kind of connecting and meeting people there. And then obviously I already had my podcast prior to starting the BFCA experience. And so that allowed me to start reaching out and connecting with those that had similar journeys. You do your research through social media. Who is this person following? Who's on this? Who wrote this article? And I started reaching out to people. And that's really what got me a solid circle of women in this field. So networking, joining organizations, going to conferences. Right now it's virtual. So there's no excuse for you not to attend, at least if you don't want to present to watch. Because that was really the avenue for me. And so they would recommend other people. They would say, well, if you're gonna, then I mentioned I'm gonna start this business. Well, this is the financial component. These are the rates. This is kind of how you want to market, everything. So I wasn't reinventing the wheel, but they really let me know that what I'm doing is needed. And I think that's the part that really helped me project into my passion and really find my path and what it was that I want to do.
Another thing, there's, once again, so much to unpack there, but another thing that I don't want listeners to overlook, because we get a lot of entrepreneurs or even aspiring entrepreneurs who listen to this, or even people, especially people who listen to my podcast, Thrive After Sports. There are folks who are feeling like they don't know what their purpose is, right? And obviously you did a great job of going into the importance of networking and connecting with people and joining groups. But even from the beginning, even when we started out on this podcast, the common thread that I'm seeing here is really serving, right? Yeah. So if you're someone like you, started in one opportunity, you wanting to serve on a broader scale led to more opportunities, which led to more opportunities, which led to you being able to serve on an even broader scale. So if you're someone who's listening and you're feeling lost right now, please just lean into serving at some way, making a contribution, because whether you're doing it for profit or just from the kindness of your heart, that's the way that your path reveals itself to you. Yes. And if you're looking for monetary gain, the money comes as a result of the value you bring into other people. So please don't overlook that. Did you want to say something about that, Marley? Because,
Yeah, it's so true. And, you know, it was my academic advisor, and I'm still close to her to this day, Dr. Kelsey from Bethune-Cookman. And she was the one, you know, when you transfer as an athlete, they don't always tell you about your credits and what goes and what doesn't go, right? So initially I was going to school for sports medicine. Not that I really knew what that entailed or what exactly I wanted to do. I just knew, okay, I'm an athlete, I'm a sports. My trainer seems to have his stuff together. I'll go that direction. But when I transferred, I would have had to stay in school an extra year, get an undergraduate degree in biology. And I was like, oh no, 2 years, they're paying for it. What do I need to do to get out on time for free? And so I already had courses in sociology and psychology. So long story short, she was the one that, you know, introduced me to that because of something she saw in me. It wasn't that I went over and beyond, but sometimes you have to pay attention to the people that are in the spaces and what they really speak into your life with social work, because at the end of the day, I am a social worker at heart. That's who I am. How can I help you? Have you tried this? Have you looked at that? You have to be careful so you don't burn yourself out. So I've been on both sides of that, right? So now I have a better balance of it. It can be challenging at times with entrepreneurship, but when you know your passion and you find it, you won't let anything stop you while you're getting there. And so that has been, like you said, the common thread that when I left healthcare, there was no other plan. I didn't really know what I was going into. I just knew I had to get back to South Florida. I'm going to apply for this program, hopefully get in, and hopefully get a job that can at least pay rent. You know, the other bills we'll hopefully figure, but as long as I can have a house and keep this car, we're good. And it worked out, you know, it worked out. So there's some sacrifice there too, but I knew there was something bigger. I just didn't know what it was. But as I was meeting people, and I definitely believe in the power of discernment, you start to know where you should go, where you shouldn't go. And when I started to create this program and start to brainstorm, I'm like, this is it. This is literally everything that I've gone through since I started sports is everything that I put into this work. So it's your entire journey and your story. So not underestimating if you're too young, if you're too old, every part of your journey will apply to every job that I've had builds on and is allowed me to create a component, how to develop content, how to, put out surveys and develop my own surveys, how to, I used to just use PowerPoints and now I use Google Slides, stuff that seems so simple. But if I was not in these places with these jobs or even in school, I would have probably never been doing half of this stuff, right? So it's taking everything that you learn and develop it in a way that it works for you. That's where the mindset shift comes in. What can you take and make it work for you? There's nothing in any job, whether I was a therapist for those struggling with addiction, everything that I've learned, running groups, teaching, individual one-on-one sessions, then all of it, it literally comes all into this. And so it's just understanding the process of it and trusting the journey, to be honest with you.
That's well said. You've done a great job of executing everything you just talked about. I think that's important. You're not just sitting here speculating. Like, you're speaking from experience.
No, this is work. This is work. And one thing I want to add, Taj, is investing in yourself. You go through these transitions with jobs, and it's hard to get the equipment that you need and maybe certain laptops that you need, but trust the process. The money will come. When, we started the organization officially in January. But with school and life, I was like, okay, we'll get to it. We'll get to the workshops. We'll get it. But then COVID hit. And I was like, what's happening and what our players are experiencing and what the parents are experiencing, what the coaches are going through, this is what I talk about. So it forced me to get that content out. And so people were like, oh, your workshops are so cheap. They need to be more. Make it, you need to do. I said, listen, this is my journey and my path. I didn't disagree with them that my workshops were not, that expensive, but there was a reason and there was a purpose for that. I knew who I was targeting. I knew who this content needed to get to help save some lives, to help people feel supported. And through those opportunities of workshops that were $10, $15, maybe $20, have given me some opportunities that I would not have necessarily found on my own. Those people coming back, word of mouth, developing programs, doing 2-day workshops, all sorts of stuff came from just being committed to my process and trusting it. You have to be careful not to you want to take the support and the insight, but you have to be mindful what your ultimate goal and your mission is. The money will come. So I definitely wanted to tap into that with you. I'm not nearly where I know God will let me be, but I'm definitely from March to now. Wow. That's all I can say.
Right. Wow, indeed. And I've seen the growth too. I've seen everything you're doing, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch it grow and watch the impact grow. And there's no doubt, I see where you're. Just don't forget about the little people who believed in you on the way up now, Marley. Okay.
You already know. Everybody that I share a platform with, I'm just honored that I'm here sharing it with you. You came onto my podcast and blessed us with knowledge. So you already know. You said it's family. At the end of the day, we in this together. We climbing together for sure.
Yes, indeed. I'm just messing with you. I only said that because I see the ascent. I see the growth. I know where you're going. And that's actually, it perfectly leads me into my next question, because you're already doing so much already with the workshops, with the podcast, with the coaching. What is the future of everything you're doing look like short term? I'm talking about, closing out the year, going into 2021, yeah. And then long term, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Like, let's just start with the short term first. What do you have kind of on the, cooking right now, ready to serve and impact people with?
For sure. So the big focus, we've actually had several meetings in the past week, is partnerships. So kind of what you were just mentioning, I can do all this work and push it out, but there are some things that others can provide that we can do together. So I've been reaching out with other social workers in the field that kind of, that are also in the athletic space, but bring a different perspective, so that we can start hosting workshops together, and hopefully making that bigger, making a one-day conference, let's, what else can we do? A 2-day conference, that's down the line. But right now we're doing partnerships, expanding our team. So, I'm working with a young lady out of Chicago who's really going to start helping us with our networking and pushing out the content and trying to market more. That's a big thing. Marketing is huge. So we're trying to find more people to connect with, to share and expand our platform with content, hopefully come into spaces where we can give something and also in return for us. Obviously expanding the podcast this season. We upped our game digitally. So I now have a digital media producer who's also a teammate and a sister of mine. So we have another athlete who's in the entrepreneurial world. So, she does like the intro of the video. It makes it look all fancy. So literally you saw what, when we had it was just a simple screen, a video upload. And now we got some music. Now I got some voiceovers. So it's just continuing to elevate the podcast and really trying to become more diverse with people that we bring on in different areas, people that are in sports, that never played a sport, but they are huge advocates for athletes. I'm connecting with people out of the country. I have a young lady from St. Lucia that will air next Monday. That's coming on the podcast. So that's the main focus right now, is expanding our reach. But by the end of the year, hopefully, we are looking to launch 2 additional programs. So I won't give too much away, but we want to start talking about, because I think, everybody talks about financial literacy. You need this, but it's so much more than just knowing these numbers and knowing your credit. Like, we want to tackle, the journey of not having a job in college, and then you start working. How do you save? Why do you save? Understanding the cost of living, just different things that I literally did not know, right? I came into an entry-level job in the hospital, got promoted. They moved me to Miami. And I said, ooh, I am balling. Yes. I'm living this life is good, right? Because it was such a jump from my initial salary, but I didn't know about cost of living. So when I got here, I was living this great life. And I was like, oh, I got to pay this credit card. Oh, rent went up a little bit this year, and so it's preparing them for that. So we're developing a program that's going to tackle with our, even our high school athletes that are graduating. We're touching into the college sector, then also with those individuals that are coming out of the college space, are working already and trying to make a transition. So we're in the process of developing a program that's going to be supportive for them in that area. We'll have some workshops with it, and some individual services that we're going to offer as well. And then a little more for social workers as far as preparation, if they're wanting to get licensed, if they're wanting to understand the balance of self-care and pursuing the licensure process, along with some of the barriers that you may hit in athletics. So 2 new programs that we're trying to incorporate along with, stepping up what we already have. So that's the big thing. And then long term, I see myself in stadiums, okay? I see myself talking to people, call me Marley, fix my life, whatever you want to call it. I see, the impact getting there, but whatever God has for me is where I'm going. But I know that this is the path and the journey. And obviously, eventually I will be Dr. Holmes. I'm in my 3rd year. So that's the other long-term goal, is completing my doctorate degree, so that, when I go into these places, they can put a little respect on my name, because I've been there, you know what I'm saying?
I know that's right. Oh man, we got to have you back on, especially after you get the doctorate, just so I can refer to you as Dr. Holmes out of respect.
I might get a necklace. I might bring that back, Dr. Holmes.
Hey, no, I think you should run with that, honestly. I think you might blow up the internet if you drop a picture of you with the cap, with the and the chain on, Dr. Holmes.
Listen, I might have to do an educated version of the City Girls. I'm just saying, just the educated version. You know what I'm saying? Just, I'm in South Florida, so we might have to put a little sauce on it. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's right. You heard it here first, folks. And when you see that chain, when you see that Dr. Holmes chain, the idea was birthed right here. You heard it here first. That's amazing. Well, I just want to, before we wrap it up, and I want to give you an opportunity to share all your social media and all that, but I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for being not just a boss, but a servant leader. You know what I mean? Someone who is actually pouring into others, someone who has really built a life for yourself off of having an impact. We need more Marley Holmes in the world. Ever since you and I connected, like I said, I consider you a sister. We never even met in person yet, but we will. We will. Please believe. We will. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. So how can people get in touch? Because I know after listening to this, they're going to want to check out your work and all your workshops and the podcast, of course. How can people get in touch with you?
For sure. Okay, so let me go down the list. So if you need to get in contact with me and find anything, the first place, just go to my website, is www.marlenehomes.com. So it has everything about my podcast. I have a YouTube channel. All of the content and the workshop and anything that we can provide of service to you is on the website. If there's anything you're interested in that you may not see on the website, still contact us so that way we can follow up with you, and maybe it's something that we can help you develop. It's something that we can facilitate. I don't want to say it's nothing I can't do, but I haven't quite found something that I can't figure out, or at least point you in the right direction. So that's the biggest thing. On Instagram, you can follow me at _BFCA, which stands for Black Female Collegiate Athlete _experience. And then I also have a Instagram page for my podcast. It's at Yep, She Said It. So YUP, She Said It. What else? Twitter. I'm trying to get better with Twitter. I kind of pop in and out, but it's at Future Dr. Holmes on Twitter. And my email is the BFCA experience at gmail.com. So that's how you can find me, but it's just easy. Just go to the website, check it out, and find everything you need on there.
Okay. Are you going to change that Future Dr. Holmes on Twitter? What you going to do after you get the doctorate?
I don't know, because there's a couple Dr. Holmes. I've had people reach out to me that's in the field, and their last name, it's like, we're on the same journey. And I was like, oh snap, I got to figure out how to make it a little, extra. So I don't know yet, but just be ready for it.
See, that's where the gold chain comes in. You put that as a profile pic. That's the real Dr. Holmes with the gold chain.
And I'm a Beyonce fan, so I'm gonna have to put a little sauce on it. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see what motivates me to do.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you for plugging all your social media. We'll have all that information in the show notes. Once again, thank you for coming on. This is why I wanted to have you on The Power of Story. Your story has me inspired. Again, I already knew, but I know a lot of people are going to be inspired by it. So I just want to say thank you again, and we will definitely be in touch as always, showing each other love from a distance.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you sharing your platform, reaching out to me. You're doing some great work and I've seen your growth as well and everything that you're doing. So you're a genuine person. You're passionate about what you do. So when I see that, I'm like, all right, we're good. So thank you again for having me on, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you, Marley. I appreciate that. All right, y'all. This has been the Power of Story podcast with self-published in 30 days with future Dr. Holmes. Until next time.